In the 20th century, there was a great revival of the works of John Donne in the metaphysical school of poetry in which he started. This was sparked off mainly by the scholarship of H.A.C. Grierson, whose versions of the poems were an attempt to outline all of the illusions and complexities of Donne's work. According to Lionel Trilling, perhaps no other work of scholarship in our century is so famous or has had so much influence. Donne's work had a continued popularity up until the 19th century, the age of Romanticism, although he wasn't then considered to be a major figure in the world of letters. When Samuel Johnson wrote his Lives of the Poets, he chose to talk about another figure in his school, which was Abraham Cowley. It was there that Johnson defined a group of 17th century writers as being metaphysical. The school was characterised by the learnedness of its adherents, many of them university educated, many of them clergy, particularly of the High Church Anglican variety. In this poem written by Donne, we are greeted with a strange metaphor, where the flea of the poem signals the act of a man and woman coming together. This is known as being a conceit, a kind of strange and extended metaphor where the poet manages to see commonalities in things that don't have a natural likeness. Helen Gardner defined it as thus: the conceit is a comparison whose ingenuity is more striking than its justness. This is seen in the metaphor of the flea, although there seemed to be something of a tradition of having fleas in poetry from past ages. There were numerous poems of the medieval era in which the flea is analogous to love. In a poem written in the 12th century and falsely attributed to Ovid, the poem reads, "O puny flea, yet a bitter plague harmful to girls, with what song shall I act against your deeds, fierce one?" In the John Donne poem, there is the use of wordplay, at least as it relates to the printed page, seeing as S in the early modern era looked almost indistinguishable from F. This has in effect given a different connotation to the line, "It sucks me first, and now sucks thee." The poem is notable for the Christian imagery that is contained within it, and when John Donne says, "In this flea our two bloods mingled be," it seems to come from the biblical notion of man and woman becoming one in marriage. The idea coming directly out of Genesis, specifically when Eve is crafted out of Adam's rib. In Genesis 2:24, it says, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh." Genesis also talks of the fall of man, when man and woman were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and although the fall was a direct result of the sinfulness of man, it affected the natural world, creating death and disease. The disease of the fallen world is perhaps signified in the flea, the result of original sin, where man and woman are barred from the realm of innocence. His love for the woman being unconsummated. Poetry invented by Donne, his poem is missing an ingenious conceit, such as is on show in The Flea. Perhaps the popularity of Donne's work can be attributed to taste as much as it can be to scholarship. Dr. Johnson, although somewhat impressed with them, found their work to be forced and lacking. Perhaps this was because he was a noted admirer of Alexander Pope, someone who he saw as being the greatest poet of his age. Pope seemed to be dismissive of the notion of conceits, T.S. Eliot held the metaphysical poets, and John Donne in particular, to be a poet of the first order, if for nothing other than to fill their thought. The reason why Samuel Johnson dismissed these poets for being artificial, the ability to combine things with thought, is exactly the same reason that T.S. Eliot, amongst others, in the 20th century were enamoured with them. The conceit, the combination of thought with an objective world of nature, no matter how preposterous, came across to the poet as being natural. As T.S. Eliot elaborated, in order to get the full flavour out of Donne, you must construe it analytically and enjoy sympathetically. You must hold the elements in suspension and contiguity in your mind, as he did himself, and you will observe that in his conceits he is equally serious as elsewhere. Others will also question this love that many 20th century writers had for metaphysical poetry. Harold Bloom stating, "Donne and Herbert do not seem to me to be poets of the eminence of Spenser and Milton, and a critical epoch that preferred them to Spenser and Milton was certain to pass away as an almost grotesque interlude in the history of taste. But they are the principal devotional poets in the language."